This is the story of an American military legend, the recipient of America's highest decorations for valor, the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 7 Silver Stars, and more than a dozen awards from allied nations. From the time he graduated top of his class from West Point until he retired with 50-plus years of service, he was a complex combination of valor and vanity, a figure of legendary victory and terrible loss. To this day, he is one of the most controversial military leaders in U.S. history. I'm Aiden Briggs, and on this special edition of History Extra Podcast, you will learn more about General Douglas MacArthur than you ever knew. You'll hear how this legendary leader enjoyed great victories and persevered through devastating defeats. And while Douglas MacArthur was undeniably successful in his militaristic endeavors, the question is raised: had MacArthur not been fired, would we remember his legacy so fondly? With me to help answer that question today is Julian Madalensky, a historian from the American Institute for History Education. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning to you too, Aiden.
So, Julian, I guess the first question I have for you is, who is Douglas MacArthur? Can you give us a little background?
Sure thing. Douglas MacArthur was born January 26, 1880 at Little Rock Barracks, Little Rock, Arkansas, to Arthur MacArthur Jr., a U.S. Army captain, and his wife, Mary Pinckney Hardy MacArthur. MacArthur was valedictorian at the West Texas Military Academy and first captain at the United States Military Academy at West Point, where he graduated top of the class of 1903. He was nominated for a Medal of Honor and was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross twice and the Silver Star 7 times. In 1925, he became the Army's youngest major general. In 1930, he became Chief of Staff of the United States Army. As such, he was involved in the expulsion of the Bonus Army protesters from Washington, D.C. in 1932, under the Hoover administration. He retired from the U.S. Army in 1937 to become military advisor to the Commonwealth Government of the Philippines. He was recalled to active duty in 1941 as commander of United States Armed Forces in the Far East. After a series of military disasters in the Philippines, MacArthur, his family, and his staff left the island in PT boats and escaped to Australia, where MacArthur became Supreme Commander, Southwest Pacific Area. He officially accepted Japan's surrender on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri anchored in Tokyo Bay, and oversaw the occupation of Japan from 1945 to 1951. As the effective ruler of Japan, he oversaw sweeping economic, political, and social changes. He led the United Nations command in the Korean War until he was removed from command by President Harry S. Truman on April 11, 1951. That's a brief synopsis of the highlights of General MacArthur's life.
So you've highlighted all of MacArthur's accolades and accomplishments, but why was he fired from his command? If he was such a talented military general, why was there any reason to fire him?
Well, the issue that got him fired occurred during the time of the Truman administration. MacArthur was fired because of a certain policy of nuclear military action that he desired to enact in the midst of the Korean War. Within weeks of the Chinese attack of South Korea and U.S. forces, MacArthur was forced to retreat from North Korea. Seoul fell in January of 1951, and both Truman and MacArthur were forced to contemplate the prospect of abandoning Korea entirely. Since in February 1950 the Soviet Union and China had signed a defensive alliance committing each other to go to war if the other party was attacked, the possibility that an American attack on China would cause World War III was considered to be very real at the time. In March 1951, secret United States intercepts of diplomatic dispatches disclosed clandestine conversations in which General MacArthur expressed confidence to the Tokyo embassies of Spain and Portugal that he would succeed in expanding the Korean War into a full-scale conflict with the Chinese Communists. When the intercepts came to the attention of President Truman, he was enraged to learn that MacArthur was not only trying to increase public support for his position on conducting the war, but had secretly informed foreign governments that he planned to initiate actions that were counter to U.S. policy at the time. The president was unable to act immediately since he could not afford to reveal the existence of the intercepts and because of MacArthur's popularity with the public and political support in Congress. However, following the release on April 5th by Representative Martin of MacArthur's letter, Truman concluded that he could relieve MacArthur of his commands without incurring unacceptable political damage. The relief of the famous general by the unpopular politician for communicating with Congress led to a constitutional crisis and a storm of public controversy. Polls showed that the majority of the public disapproved of the decision to relieve MacArthur. By February of 1952, almost 9 months later, Truman's approval rating had fallen to 22%. As of 2014, that remains the lowest Gallup poll approval rating recorded by any serving president.
That's about all the time we have for today. I would like to thank you for tuning in to this special edition of History Extra Podcast. Until next time, keep on learning.